Hello, this is Moonlit Ink BL. I hope you enjoy today's story. Let's begin. Act 1. The fluorescent lights of the St. Jude Medical Center didn't just hum. They vibrated against the inside of Aries Flynn's skull like a swarm of angry hornets. He tried to shift his weight, but a white-hot spike of agony shot from his ankle straight to his hip, forcing a jagged gasp past his lips. Note to self, he thought through the haze of painkillers, top-shelf architectural models and socks on hardwood floors are a lethal combination. He remembered the sound most of all, the sickening crack as his foot caught the edge of a mahogany pedestal, followed by the slow-motion tumble that ended with him tangled in balsa wood and superglue. He'd managed to crawl to his phone, his vision tunneling, and dialed 911 because there was no one else to dial. Or so he thought. "Mr. Flynn? You're drifting again." Aries blinked, his eyes focusing on a nurse hovering over his foredrip. Did the model survive? The nurse offered a pitying smile. "I think you have bigger problems than a miniature building, sweetie. Your vitals are stabilizing, but you've got a grade 3 sprain and a hairline fracture. You're going to be off that foot for at least 6 weeks. Aries groaned, dropping his head back into the pillow. "Great. My career is literally standing on one leg." "Well, lucky for you, your emergency contact picked up on the first ring," she said, checking her tablet. "He's been out in the waiting room for 20 minutes. I'll send him in." Aries frowned. Emergency contact? His mother lived in Florida. His sister was trekking through Nepal. He must have put down his old college roommate, Mark. Good old, reliable, probably going to make fun of me for tripping on air Mark. "Thanks," Aries muttered. "Send him in so he can start the mockery." The heavy door creaked open. Aries didn't look up at first, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. "If you brought a camera to take a picture of me in this gown, Mark, I swear I was thinking more along the lines of a bouquet of get-well lilies, but I figured you'd be allergic to the sentiment." The voice wasn't Mark's. It was a voice that lived in the deepest, most irritated corners of Aries' memory. It was smooth, slightly lower than it had been 5 years ago, and possessed a natural cadence that always sounded like it was winning an argument. Aries' head snapped toward the door. Standing there, leaning against the frame with a terrifyingly effortless posture, was Jeric Heart. He looked disgustingly good. His dark hair was styled in that messy-on-purpose way that Aries could never pull off, and his shoulders had filled out his charcoal sweater in a way that screamed, "I have a gym membership and I actually use it." "Jeric!" Aries' voice cracked. "What the hell are you doing here?" Jeric stepped into the room, his eyes scanning Aries from head to toe with a clinical, infuriatingly calm gaze. "You're the one who kept me on your paperwork, Flynn. I was just sitting down for dinner when the hospital called to tell me my designated person had a fight with a floor and lost." Aries felt a flush of heat that had nothing to do with his fever. The paperwork. He remembered now. 10 years ago, when they were both 18 and their mothers were best friends, his mom had forced him to fill out a permanent medical proxy before he moved into his first apartment. "In case I'm on a cruise, Aries, you need someone local. Put Jeric down. He's a responsible boy." He'd never changed it. He'd moved 4 times, finished a degree, started a firm, and he had completely forgotten that Jeric Heart was legally responsible for his life. "It was an accident," Aries snapped, trying to sit up and immediately regretting it as his head throbbed. "And I'm fine. You can go back to whatever it is you do. Saving puppies? Winning marathons? Being the local saint." Jeric walked closer, stopping at the edge of the bed. He didn't look annoyed, he looked amused. "I'm a trauma nurse, actually, which is why I know that fine doesn't involve a grade 3 sprain and a concussion. You can't even walk to the bathroom right now, let alone take care of yourself in that 3rd-floor walk-up of yours." "I'll manage," Aries hissed, his pride stinging worse than his ankle. This was Jeric Heart, the boy who beat him for valedictorian by 0.02 GPA points. The boy who took the last spot on the varsity soccer team. The boy who was the benchmark for everything Aries failed to be. "You won't," Jeric said, his voice softening just a fraction, though the competitive glint remained. He reached out, his hand hovering near Aries' bandaged foot before he caught himself and pulled back. The doctor said you need 24-hour observation for the next few days because of the head hit. Since your family is out of state, that's me. No, absolutely not. Jeric pulled a set of discharge papers from the end of the bed and clicked a pen. You have two choices, Aries. You can stay here and rack up a bill that'll cost more than your firm's annual revenue, or you can let me take you home and play nurse. Aries glared at him. He wanted to scream. He wanted to demand a different contact. But as he looked at Jeric, the boy who had always been his shadow, his rival, and his greatest frustration, he saw something he didn't expect. He saw genuine concern, buried under layers of that old, familiar smugness. I hate you, Aries whispered. Jeric offered a small, devastatingly handsome smirk as he began to sign the forms. I know. It's the only thing about you that hasn't changed. Now let's get you dressed. We're going to my place. Your place. You have stairs, Flynn. I have a ground floor condo and a guest bed with high thread count sheets. Jeric leaned in, his shadow falling over Aries. Consider it a new competition. Let's see how long it takes for you to actually admit you need me. Act 2. The transition from the hospital to Jeric's condo was a blur of humiliating dependency. Jeric didn't just drive. He navigated the city with a precision that made Aries' head spin. When they arrived, Jeric didn't even ask. He simply scooped Aries up in a bridal carry that left Aries sputtering and clutching Jeric's neck for dear life. Put me down. I can hop. Aries had protested, his face buried in the crook of Jeric's sweater. You'll hop right into a refracture, and then I'll have to fill out even more paperwork, Jeric had replied, his heartbeat steady against Aries' chest. Jeric's condo was exactly what Aries expected. Minimalist, expensive, and irritatingly organized. The guest room was a sanctuary of soft grays and blues, dominated by a bed that looked like a cloud. I have a deadline, Aries announced 3 hours later. He was propped up on 4 pillows, his leg elevated and encased in a heavy medical boot. His laptop was open on his lap, but the screen was a smear of colors he couldn't quite focus on. Jeric appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with a glass of water and 2 orange pills. The only deadline you have is your next dose of ibuprofen. Laptop away, Flynn. It's a proposal for the Mercer account. If I don't send it by Friday, I lose the commission. Aries tried to sound authoritative, but his voice lacked its usual bite. Jeric walked over and, with the practiced ease of a man who dealt with difficult patients daily, closed the laptop lid. The Mercer account can wait. Your brain, however, is currently sloshing around in a minor hemorrhage. Drink. Aries glared at the glass. You're enjoying this. The power trip. The nurse Heart routine. Jeric pulled a chair over, sitting close enough that Aries could smell the faint, clean scent of eucalyptus and antiseptic. I'm not enjoying the part where I have to change your ice pack at 3 a.m., but I am enjoying the silence. You're much less annoying when you're drugged up. By the second night, the bravado began to crack. The painkillers wore off in the dark, leaving Aries with a throbbing ankle and a restless mind. Every time he tried to shift, the bed groaned, and he felt like a burden, a feeling he had spent his entire life running away from. He tried to reach for the water on the nightstand, his fingers brushing the glass and knocking it over. Clatter. Damn it, Aries whispered, hot tears of frustration stinging his eyes. He wasn't crying because of the water. He was crying because he couldn't even drink without failing. The door opened instantly. The hall light spilled in, casting Jeric's silhouette long across the floor. He didn't say, I told you so. He didn't even sigh. He just grabbed a towel from the ensuite, wiped up the spill, and refilled the glass. I can do it, Aries snapped, his voice thick. Just go back to sleep. Jeric didn't leave. He sat on the edge of the bed, the mattress sinking under his weight. In the dim light, his face looked softer, the sharp edges of their rivalry smoothed over by the shadows. Aries, Jeric said quietly, stop trying to win a game no one else is playing. You were always playing it, Aries retorted, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Every science fair, every track meet, every girl I liked who ended up asking about you. You were always a step ahead. And now, look at me. I'm a mess in your guest room. Jeric reached out, his hand hesitating before landing gently on Aries' shoulder. His thumb rubbed a small, soothing circle through the fabric of Aries' t-shirt. I wasn't trying to be a step ahead, Jeric admitted, his voice a low rumble in the quiet room. I was trying to stay in your line of sight. You were the only person in that town who didn't just hand me things because of my last name or my grades. You fought me for them. It was the only thing that felt real. Is it? Jeric's hand moved from Aries' shoulder to his cheek, his fingers warm and calloused. I've had your name on my emergency contact list since I was 18, too, Aries. I just never forgot to change it. I chose not to. Aries looked up, his heart hammering against his ribs. Not from pain, but from the sudden, terrifying realization that the enemy he had been fighting for 10 years had actually been his anchor all along. Before Aries could process the confession, Jeric leaned in, his forehead resting against Aries for a brief, flickering second. Sleep, Aries. We can settle the score in the morning. Act 3. The shift in the house was palpable. The air between them had grown thick with the weight of Jeric's midnight confession, leaving Aries in a state of hyper-awareness. He found himself tracking Jeric's movements through the condo, the rhythm of his footsteps, the way he hummed while making breakfast, the focused line of his shoulders as he checked his work emails. But the nursing phase was abruptly cut short by a phone call that shattered Jeric's unshakable composure. Aries was practicing his limited mobility walk with a pair of crutches in the living room when he heard it. A sharp, choked intake of breath from the kitchen. He swung himself toward the doorway to find Jeric standing by the counter, his phone gripped so hard his knuckles were white. When? Jeric's voice was hollow. Okay. No, I'll be there. Give me 20 minutes. He hung up and stared at the wall. For the first time since Aries had known him, Jeric Heart looked small. Jeric? Aries asked, the rubber tips of his crutches squeaking as he moved closer. What happened? Jeric blinked, coming back to himself, but the mask didn't quite fit right. My grandfather. He's had a stroke. It's bad, Aries. He's at the hospital I work at, but I'm off duty. They just called because I'm his proxy. The irony wasn't lost on Aries. The man who had been playing the role of the indestructible protector was suddenly the one whose world was collapsing. Go, Aries said firmly. I can't leave you here, Jeric countered, though his eyes were already darting toward his keys. You can barely get to the kitchen, and your meds. Jeric, look at me. Aries dropped one crutch and used the wall to steady himself, reaching out to grab Jeric's arm. I am an adult. I can sit on this couch and not die for a few hours. Your grandfather needs the nursing version of you. Go. Jeric left in a whirlwind of panic, leaving the condo deafeningly silent. As the hours ticked by, Aries realized that being the one left behind was its own kind of torture. Every time his phone buzzed, his heart leaped into his throat. He tried to focus on his architectural sketches, but the lines kept turning into EKG readouts in his mind. At 2 a.m., the front door clicked open. Jeric stumbled in, his movements heavy and uncoordinated. He didn't turn on the lights. He just leaned his back against the door and slid down to the floor, burying his face in his hands. Aries didn't use the crutches. He didn't want the noise to startle him. He hopped and shuffled his way across the hardwood, ignoring the dull throb in his ankle until he reached the entryway. He sank down onto the floor next to Jeric, his bad legs stretched out awkwardly. Is he? Aries started, his voice a whisper. Stable. For now, Jeric rasped. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot and rimmed with tears. He didn't recognize me, Aries. He looked right through me like I was just another staff member. The golden boy was gone. In his place was a man who was exhausted from carrying the weight of everyone else's emergencies. Aries didn't know the perfect thing to say. That was Jeric's department. So he did the only thing he could. He reached out and pulled Jeric's head onto his shoulder. It was awkward, and Aries' hip ached from the position, but he didn't pull away. You've spent years being everyone's emergency contact, Jeric, Aries murmured, his hand finding its way into Jeric's hair, stroking it just as Jeric had done for him. You're allowed to have an emergency of your own. Jeric let out a ragged sob, his fingers clutching the hem of Aries' shirt like a lifeline. The competition was dead. There was no scoreboard in the dark of the hallway, only two people who had finally stopped running long enough to catch each other. I'm here, Aries whispered. I'm not going anywhere. Even if I could walk, I wouldn't leave. Jeric pulled back just enough to look at him, his gaze searching Aries' face. In the dim light of the street lamp outside, the rivalry finally dissolved, replaced by a quiet, devastating intimacy. I think I've been waiting for you to say that since we were 10 years old, Jeric whispered. Act 4. The final follow-up at the orthopedist's office was supposed to be a victory lap. Aries sat on the crinkly paper of the exam table, swinging his leg. The heavy medical boot sat on the floor like a discarded shell. For the first time in 6 weeks, he was wearing matching socks and his own sneakers. He was healed. He was independent. He was, by all accounts, free to go back to his third-floor walk-up and his solitary life. Everything looks perfect, Mr. Flynn, the doctor said, scribbling a final note. Just a bit of physical therapy to regain the full range of motion. We'll keep your file active, but you're cleared for all normal activity. Thanks, Doc, Aries said, but the words felt heavy. As he walked out into the waiting room, he saw Jeric. He wasn't leaning against the wall with his usual smug confidence today. He was sitting in a plastic chair, nursing a lukewarm coffee, looking tired but steady. His grandfather was in rehab now, the crisis had passed, and life was supposed to return to its previous orbit. The drive back to Jeric's condo was uncharacteristically quiet. The rivalry banter that usually filled the gaps felt like an ill-fitting suit. Inside the condo, Aries began to pack his small duffel bag. He moved with a slight limp, but he moved on his own. Jeric stood by the kitchen island, watching him. So, Jeric said, his voice neutral, the bird is fledging the nest. I have a mountain of mail and a dead fern waiting for me, Aries replied, tucking his laptop into his bag. He paused, looking around the minimalist space that had started to feel like home. I should probably pay you for the nursing fees, and the groceries, and the sanity. Jeric walked over, stopping a few feet away. I don't want your money, Aries. Aries straightened up, his heart doing a nervous gallop. Then what do you want? Because the emergency is over. I'm not a patient anymore. I know you're not, Jeric said. He stepped into Aries' space, bridging the gap they had maintained since that night on the hallway floor. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. The hospital discharge form from 6 weeks ago. I was looking at this earlier. Aries looked down. Under the emergency contact section, his own handwriting from a decade ago was still there, identifying Jeric as friend/neighbor. I realized something, Jeric whispered, his eyes locking onto Aries with an intensity that made the room feel small. I've spent 10 years being the person you call when everything goes wrong. I'm tired of being your safety net, Aries. Aries felt a cold prickle of fear. You want out? No, Jeric said, a small, genuine smile breaking through. I want to be the person you call when things go right. I want to be the one you call just because you saw a building you liked, or because you're bored, or because you can't sleep. I don't want to be a contact anymore. I want to be the person you're coming home to. Aries dropped his duffel bag. The sound of it hitting the floor was the final surrender. You're so dramatic, Aries breathed, even as he reached out and grabbed the front of Jeric's shirt, pulling him close. You really had to wait until I could walk away to give me a reason to stay? I had to make sure you were staying for me, Jeric murmured. Not just for the guest bed and the painkillers. Aries leaned up, kissing Jeric with all the pent-up frustration, competition, and longing of the last 10 years. It wasn't a win for either of them. It was a tie, perfect, leveled-out draw. When they finally pulled apart, Aries was breathless, his forehead resting against Jeric's. I'm still keeping you on the forms, you know? I'm a liability. I'll probably trip over a rug by next Tuesday. Jeric laughed, a warm sound that vibrated through Aries' chest. I'm counting on it, but we're updating the description. To what? Jeric kissed his temple, his arms wrapping around Aries' waist, holding him fast. To everything. Epilogue, the update. A week later, Aries sat at his desk in his own apartment, filling out a new insurance form for his firm. He reached the bottom of the page, where the red asterisks marked the mandatory fields. Emergency contact name, Jeric Heart relationship to patient. Aries hovered his pen over the line for a long moment. He thought about the trophies, the grades, the hospital room, and the way Jeric looked in the morning light. He smiled to himself and wrote a single word in bold, elegant script. Mine.